ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਹੋਸਟ ਆਸ਼ਮਿਤਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਨਿੱਘਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਇੱਕ ਨਵੀਂ ਲੋਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਬਿਫੋਰ ਆਈ ਟੈਲ ਯੂ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਲਾਈਮੇਟ ਚੇਂਜ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਇਟਸ no longer climate change it's become a climate crisis and it's clearly the defining issue of my generation and the generations that are coming after me and today's generation as well. But when it comes to addressing the climate crisis, it seems that the efforts that are currently underway often fall too short or are often just siloed in certain areas but not all encompassing. They don't address the vastness of the climate crisis that we are undergoing today. But what if I told you there was a plan underway to bring partners from different research institutions, different universities, different government and environmental justice organizations, and local businesses to put together a consortium that would address the climate issue in an all-encompassing way? And what if I told you that this was going to take place right here in New York City? Well, I have good news because recently it was announced that New York City, under Mayor Eric Adams' leadership, has partnered with Stony Brook University to build the first ever climate exchange center on Governor's Island. The $700 billion project is being touted as groundbreaking and a first of its kind project that brings partners from various areas of science, environmentalism, sustainable energy, jobs, and skill building, all led by Stony Brook University. Well, as you can imagine, we're here in Stony Brook University and I'll let my viewers know that this is a moment of pride for me as a Stony Brook alum to be presenting this program to you and to share with you the leadership that Stony Brook has shown when it comes to putting together this climate consortium. In fact, in today's program, we'll speak with the academic and research lead on this project, Professor Kevin Reed. We have a great program. Let's go inside this building and see what all kinds of science, innovation, and research is taking place right here in Stony Brook University. As I walk through this brand new building, the Simon Center, right here in Stony Brook University, I'm reminded again of this school's priority on a STEM curriculum, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In fact, Stony Brook has not only been heralded as a leader in the science technology space in New York, but has been declared recently by Governor Kathy Hochul a flagship institution. All of this adds to the research that's going to take place at the Climate Exchange Consortium. Once again, this consortium, the physical building, the groundbreaking construction of it, is set to take place in 2025 on Governor's Island with the official operational date set for 2028. But we're hearing rumors that the work has already begun, and in fact, bringing all of these various partners together, once again, different universities, different businesses, local as well as global leaders trying to make a difference in the climate space. As all these people come together, they're not waiting for a building to be built on Governor's Island. They're moving forward with their work. They're already planning. And guess what? The research and the science innovation that this consortium promises, some of those solutions are already being discussed. So like we said, the research and academic lead on the project, Professor Kevin Reed, is going to be joining us in the program today. Once again, we're broadcasting to you from Stony Brook University right here in New York, my alma mater. It's so good to be back on campus. Let's head to class. at Stony Brook University, we're talking about the extremely significant, exciting new initiative that's been approved by the New York City mayor, and Stony Brook is at the helm of this project. Joining us now is the academic lead on this initiative, Professor Kevin Reed. First of all, Professor, I want to welcome you to the program. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. I want to let our viewers know you're not only Associate Dean for Research and Associate Professor for the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences here at Stony Brook, but you are the research and academic leader on this project. And when it comes to the science behind all of this, we hope you can share some of the work you've been doing. Once again, Professor Reed, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. When it comes to this project, obviously Stony Brook has been working on putting this together for a long time now. Publicly, things were announced a couple of years back. To now finally have been chosen, gives the green light to move forward. But I'd love to hear a little bit about the background of how this consortium, this plan to bring all these partners together and to be a leader in this research, this science, came about.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's of course been a pretty long journey. I mean, right, this journey really started about 2 years ago when we received news that the Trust for Governors Island and the City of New York were going to put out start the formal process of selecting an anchor institution for the Center for Climate Solutions. And so that's really, when the process kind of started here on campus. Of course, there was discussions amongst a variety of faculty and leadership. And it was really in that summer of 2021, right, where we started to really think about, what would it take, right, to go on this endeavor, but also, what were the strengths of Stony Brook, of course, as a now named flagship institution within the SUNY system, but really as a public research institution that's focused on challenges for New Yorkers in general. Right. So not just Long Islanders, right, but New Yorkers, including in the city and all around the state. Yep. And so when we started to think about, okay, this is something we really want to do, this is kind of in our DNA as Stony Brook, particularly because we have the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences here, which is a well-known school that focuses on our marine coastal environments as well as changes in weather and sustainability. And we have a long history of working with communities right on
Southampton.
Long Island. Yeah, right. We have a Marine Research Center right in Southampton. And we kind of looked at this and went, right, we are well suited to do this, right? We are a public institution in New York. We got to do this. But we don't, right? Climate change is a large challenge, right? So not one university or one institution has all of the expertise you need to really help deliver climate solutions for New York City and beyond. Right. And so then we kind of started the process of thinking about who would be the right partners for us. What institutions out there, both nationally and internationally, as well as locally, can help fill some of that expertise that we don't necessarily have. And so that's why we started to choose our partners diligently, try to understand if they were interested, understand, how they would maybe fill our aspects of thinking about sustainable construction, for example. That's not something that Stony Brook University is necessarily known for from an education side.
I don't think sustainable construction is even a term that's really on the map in a big way yet. And this is probably exactly why this kind of a climate exchange, this kind of a facility is probably long overdue. Professor Reed, you talk about New Yorkers, and before we get into the science of it all, I'd love for our viewers who are listening, whether it's in New York or like the climate exchange promises, solutions that can be scaled up and applied globally. Let's talk a little bit about some of the job training and skills building programs that are touted as part of this center.
Yeah, so that links exactly well a little bit to how we put together this proposal, and it was with those partners. So our partners weren't just other institutions, that we actually put together the proposal working directly with community groups in New York City, working directly with workforce kind of trade unions in the city, working directly with environmental justice groups that have focused really on the environmental impacts right in New York City. And so what we've done in the proposal we've developed that was selected is really focused on how do we ensure that the programming, the educational and workforce training programming, is is not necessarily unique to New York, but is unique to New York's problems. Right. And so the idea is, how can we start to amplify the existing programs that already exist? So you can imagine, we're kind of thinking that even in the coming years, as we start to develop the physical space, that we will already start to kind of provide educational opportunities to people of all ages, right? So whether it is a first grader coming to the island as part of a field trip and learning a little bit about sustainable, let's say, composting, or whether it's a high school student in class that comes to gain experience of learning about kind of marine systems in the harbor, all the way up to thinking about, right, as New York City tries to meet its climate goals, which I'm confident it'll meet, right, it will have a large shift in the economy, and what skills are needed. And so the example I always like to give is, you imagine, right, New York City is known for its buildings, right? There's lots of buildings. Those buildings are the technology that goes into measuring their energy efficiencies as well as adapting these buildings to be more carbon friendly will require new skills for that workforce. And so the idea is that the New York Climate Exchange can be the place, right, where we come and we think, what are the skills and what does New York City need, and how can we start to help provide that?
You know, you're talking about workforce and some of these long-term plans, but I have to say, one of the things, especially as a New Yorker, that a lot of folks are really excited about is the building itself, right? This facility on Governor's Island, state-of-the-art, blends in with the natural landscape. I want to learn a little bit about how this facility is not just something that's aesthetically pleasing, non-obtrusive, but also environmentally friendly, sustainable, especially when it comes to its energy solutions. Today we're talking with Professor Kevin Reed about Stony Brook University's leadership in the new climate exchange set to take place on Governor's Island right here in New York City. Professor Reed, welcome back to the program once again. You know, you kind of laid out the larger need for this kind of a consortium to address the expansive climate issues we are all facing. You know, whether it's extreme weather patterns, which is your area of specialty, or other climate challenges that are affecting not just, you know, New Yorkers, but the world at large. This climate exchange touts a lot of benefits, whether it's for the economy, job growth, skills building, whether it's for the student body. But one of the big, you know, factors that is really creating a lot of excitement is the building itself. Tell us about the science behind the building, right? Maybe folks have heard the term carbon neutral, but I'm sure this is a little bit more than what we generally understand that to be.
Yeah, so the building aspect is, of course, an important part of this project. And a lot of what we're trying to do at the New York Climate Exchange is to demonstrate climate solutions right on the island. And the building itself will be this. It'll be a living laboratory for us to learn about how you can build these type of carbon neutral buildings right in an urban environment that is, you know, New York City. And so some of the things that we're really excited about and that we've built into the design, right, is that the building will produce its own energy for powering it. So it'll be fully electric, and that energy will come from solar panels. It'll also come from geothermal wells. But in addition, all of the water, right, for the building will be internal, so it won't need external water. All of the waste, right, will kind of be a full cycle, right, on the island. And this is something that Governor's Island already prides itself on doing already. And then ultimately, the building and the campus will produce energy for the rest of the island as well. And so the idea is to demonstrate that this is doable, but also to learn from it. And so one of the important ways to build a sustainable building, one of the new technologies we're using, at least new for New York, is mass timber, right? So the building will actually be probably one of the largest buildings in New York City that's built out of timber.
Wow.
And, you know, this is important because it's one of the ways in which we store carbon, right?
Okay.
But also, the other aspect of it that I'm excited about is, of course, the new building, but the other aspect is related to renovation of the existing buildings right on the island. And so we will be using some of those spaces for dormitories, for cafeterias, and for, you know, temporary housing for those working on the island.
Right.
And the idea behind that is that's how New York City is going to meet its climate goals, right? Is adapting existing buildings. So we're kind of displaying both ways right on the island, which you can do with that. And through the whole process, starting with design all the way through building and construction and the eventual operation of the building, we're going to be using this as an opportunity to collect data, right? To learn information so that we can share that more broadly as others start to embark on similar projects as it relates to construction.
Professor Reed, when you think about building new structures in an area like a coastal region like New York City, especially something so close to the water, or in the case of Governor's Island, in the middle of the water, what kind of concerns do you have, especially with your research in hurricanes and extreme weather, that indicates whether or not rising water levels or mega storms could potentially disrupt or threaten this new structure, this new building, or the climate exchange?
Yeah, so that's something, of course, we've thought a lot about.
Right.
And so the new building itself will be built in a way in which it's already elevated right off the water, even more so to be above the floodplain.
Okay.
But we're going to demonstrate ways in which you can do that actually brings in some of the natural resilience that the coastline can have, right? So typically, right, a lot of New York, particularly Manhattan and Governor's Island, is surrounded with very rigid barriers as a form of protection from the sea.
Right.
But there are ways to do this in which you can break up that coastline, and we see examples of this around the city, especially with some ongoing projects. But to build in a little bit of, it doesn't have to be just a big wall to go up. That you can build in. Vegetation. You can build in a new kind of coastline that has wildlife in it, but also provide an opportunity to study that wildlife, and to do that in a way in which it would be more resilient to future storms. So the building isn't just sustainable from the carbon and water perspective, it's also resilient to future storms by its design.
Right. Once again, this particular project is being heralded as one of a kind. This kind of grouping of the partners you've described is absolutely groundbreaking. But I have to ask you, on a lighter note, some media reports have described this project similar to the Cornell campus that exists on Randall Island, but one particular reporting said it's like the Cornell campus, but on steroids. I'd love to hear what you think about that in terms of how does it compare to things that may have been done before and how this climate exchange is unique in itself.
Yeah, so I think, of course, it's building on the foundation of other ways in which, the city and institutions like Stony Brook have tried to tackle these large challenges through kind of new approaches to collaboration and convening, which is really what this is. And so the idea here is that we, again, are really trying to be a demonstration of how you can be more resilient and sustainable in New York City.
Right.
And so we're kind of building on the foundation of Cornell Tech. I mean, if you look at Cornell Tech, a lot of the design specs that they have for that campus, right? It's built on being sustainable and resilient and building it into the natural environment that was Roosevelt Island. It's a little bit different, of course, on Governor's Island, which is, a large part of it's a park. There's historic buildings. But the idea is to show, how you can build these relatively large buildings, but do it in the context that continues, the legacy of what's already in that environment.
I think that's a great way to put it. Let's talk a little bit about some of the actual the technology that's being talked about. And once again, folks, we are years out from construction. I believe groundbreaking is 2025, set to be complete by 2028. So we have a few years ahead of us. But I'd love to hear about this one particular technology, the Research and Technology Accelerator. So what is that? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, so I guess, I'll just start with, as a professor and scientist, it's maybe one of the parts that I'm, most excited about. But it's really an opportunity to kind of break from the traditional ways in which we do scientific research and development on campuses. And so oftentimes we work in our silos, even right here on Stony Brook, departments are separated and we're working on separate research projects. And of course we collaborate sometimes, but this is an opportunity to say, okay, I have an idea or I have an unproven technology that I want to test. And the idea is that if you partner with through our partnerships, with places like Georgia Tech, Washington, Pratt, Pace, CUNY, right? IBM. If we can think about, oh, okay, we can bring all this collective from different disciplines and different approaches, and then we can accelerate it just by the fact that we're all being able to work together in one area, that we can hope to bring technologies to demonstration much, much sooner. And then eventually down the line, provide an avenue for how do we commercialize, or how do we help set up startups related to that.
Right.
And the way in which I think we are really going to accelerate that is just by providing a space, and providing a space to demonstrate the solution, right?
You know, in a world, in a post-COVID world of, you know, folks doing everything remote or via Zoom, it's nice to hear about something that is taking a physical, tangible space with the explicit purpose of bringing people together again, and for such an important cause, such a great mission. Climate exchange, $700 billion project that's set to take place on Governor's Island in New York City. But at the heart of it is the research itself that will come out of this exchange, this consortium of all the partners, the schools, the government entities, the local partners. I'd love to hear from you, once again, from your professional opinion. Your expertise is in you know, extreme weather, hurricanes, all of these which we have seen in a higher frequency as of late. What do you feel should be the research priority for the consortium once it's operational?
Yeah, so, you know, just to pick up on what you were saying, I mean, right, as a climate scientist, I can say climate change is here, right? The impacts are real, and we're experiencing them now, and it's important that we try to reduce the impacts of climate change in the future. And so where we kind of see this going is it's really focused on three main kind of research areas. The first, of course, is on inclusion and environmental justice, right? The only way we're going to be able to develop solutions for New York City is that if we involve communities and all the stakeholders from New York City in different ways for the whole kind of life cycle, right? So being place-based on our solutions. But the other aspects that'll be really critical to New York City are on some of the things we've already talked about in the past, right? Related to sustainable urban environments. So how do we build sustainable buildings that are resilient to those changes, to the rising seas, to the changes in storm intensity? But the other area which is critical for any urban environment is really the food, water, energy nexus, right? So how do we have clean energy, but clean water, and food that's maybe made more locally in sustainable ways? And they're so interlinked that we think this is a perfect place on an island to test some of those technologies.
Professor, you mentioned food, you know, the food security issue, right? And I'm going a little off script here because this is something, especially in the developing world, is a concern as of yesterday, right? We're talking about long-term vision, right? Once again, groundbreaking for the center is 2025, hopefully completed by 28, operational that point forward. You know, when it comes to some of these issues, what is the 10, 15-year plan? What's the long-term vision that you see of the kind of impact this center will be making, the kind of solutions that may be scaled up and used, especially if you could say something about the food insecurity problems facing the developing world already?
Yeah, so, you know, I'll just first start with saying we're not going to wait 10 to 15 years to start this work, right? So we're going to already start working with our partners and think about technologies that we can develop elsewhere before Governor's Island is operational. But really, when you kind of look forward 10, 15 years, I mean, you know, first, if you were to step off the ferry on Governor's Island, you're going to see hundreds of students. There's going to be 100 students living on the island at any one point, participating in that sustainability, taking it back to their campus, right? So this will be a study abroad-like program. They'll take it back to their discipline, whether it's English or pre-med or physics or engineering. They're going to have this unique experience. So it's going to start to percolate through all of the kind of economy and different career paths. But also you'll start to see maybe new technologies. Maybe there's a way to do sustainable urban farming, or a new technology that can be developed there. Or the one that I always think is interesting would be, you know, around materials for sustainable coastlines, right? So maybe you'll start to see not only those new coasts being built around New York City, but maybe you'll see them in other parts of the world. But also I think the other important thing is that you'll just see a constant flux of people, right? So it's called the New York Climate Exchange for a reason, right? It's information exchange, it's idea exchange. And so the idea is you're hoping to see people from all the world coming here for maybe specialized workshops at the New York Climate Exchange, or maybe an opportunity to engage with the UN, for example. And then they're taking that information, whether it's back to their school in Brooklyn, or whether it's back to their institution in Africa, or whether it's back to their community, in Europe. And the idea there is that there'll be this constant flux, and so all of these type of solutions and ideas will continually to kind of iterate.
Professor, I know this is the wrap up of the interview. I know you have a lot of demands on your time at the moment, but I have to ask, right? So this is what that 10-15 years looks like. This is what 2028, the day that the center is up and running, looks like. What do the next couple of years look like, right? What work are you guys doing in the meantime from now until 2025?
Yeah, so of course we're going in first into the design phase of the physical place, right? So we're trying to build more and more information in that and make sure we're engaging our stakeholders in doing that. And so that's ongoing. But the idea is that we have a partnership and a network for a region, and we're going to start to leverage the network. And so we're going to already start thinking about how can we do things that don't need a physical space on Governor's Island, or how can we leverage our partners that are tenants right on Governor's Island to start, bringing those community engagement opportunities, to start having some maybe weekend learning opportunities, but also ways to kind of start to engage our own students right here on campus, right, in this exciting new effort.
Amazing stuff. Once again, we're here at Stony Brook University. You've been listening from Professor Kevin Reed, who is the academic research lead on this massive, groundbreaking climate exchange consortium that is set to break ground on Governor's Island 2025. But the way Professor Reed makes it seem, the work's already begun. So stay tuned. We're going to keep sharing more information about this consortium, about the much needed research that's going to be taking place when it comes to climate studies, or as we like to say, the climate crisis that's already underway. If you have any questions or comments about today's program, you can write to us, info@jusbroadcasting.com, Aashmeeta@jusbroadcasting.com. It's great to see you, and we'll see you in the next program.